All right, let's dive into a series of ancient stories that are just packed with drama. We're talking about impossible odds, moments of deep despair, and, well, some pretty incredible outcomes. We're going to explore the miracles of Elisha.
Man of God, there is death in the pot. Can you just imagine hearing that, shouted in sheer panic? It's this incredibly dramatic cry for help from a story we'll get to in a bit. But honestly, it perfectly sets the stage for the high-stakes world we're about to jump into.
So, at the center of all this is the prophet Elisha. And you've got to understand the world he was living in. It was a time of really intense hardship. I mean, we're talking about widespread famine, the kind of debt that could absolutely crush you, and the constant, ever-present threat of death. It's in that world that these miracles start to happen.
Our first story, it's one that feels surprisingly modern, you know? It's a story about economic despair. It's about a widow who is on the absolute edge, facing not just being broke, but losing everything that matters to her.
This is her cry for help to Elisha. And listen, the stakes could not be any higher. In the ancient world, debt wasn't just a number. If you couldn't pay, creditors could literally take your children as slaves to pay it off. So this isn't just a financial problem for her. Her family is about to be ripped apart.
So Elisha asks her a simple question. What do you have? And her answer is just devastating. She has nothing. No money, no assets, no property, nothing. Except for this one tiny, almost worthless jar of olive oil. That's it. That's all she has to her name. From any logical point of view, it is a completely hopeless situation.
And what happens next is so fascinating. Elisha's instructions aren't just some magic spell. It's a process, and it requires her to do something. First, he says, go gather resources. Find every empty jar you can, borrow from your neighbors. Second, create a private space. Shut the door. This is an act of faith happening away from any skeptical eyes. Third, get to work. Start pouring from that one little jar. And the final step, the whole point of it all, sell the oil and pay off those debts for good.
The result? It's just astonishing. She starts pouring, and the oil just keeps flowing. She fills one jar, then another, and another. The miracle only stopped when she completely ran out of jars to fill. It was this incredible act of abundance that didn't just help her, it solved her crisis completely. She paid her debts and had enough to live on.
So we've gone from a crisis of money to, well, the ultimate human crisis, the loss of a child. This next story is just a powerful, gut-wrenching account of overwhelming grief and what seems like an impossible restoration.
You can see the whole emotional roller coaster right here. A woman is kind to Elisha, so he promises her a son, something she'd given up all hope for. The promise comes true, but then tragedy strikes, and the boy suddenly dies. This leads to this mother's desperate plea for help, and finally, to a life restored.
When she finally gets to Elisha, this is what she says. And you can just feel the raw pain in her words. It's not just grief. It's the unique agony of being given a hope you never asked for, only to have it violently snatched away. It's just a truly heartbreaking moment.
Now, when Elisha gets there, he doesn't just stand back and say a prayer. What's described as this incredibly intense, personal, and physical act. He goes into the room, shuts the door behind him, and literally stretches himself out over the child's body, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. It's this profound, almost strange act of connecting with the boy's condition.
And this is the first sign that something is changing. The coldness of death starts to fade away, and warmth, the very essence of life, begins to return to the boy's body. You can feel the tension building as death itself is slowly being reversed.
Elisha gets up, he walks around the room, and then he does it all again, stretching himself out over the boy a second time. And then the boy sneezes. Not once, but 7 times. In these ancient texts, that number 7 often signals divine completion, perfection. It's a sign that life has fully and completely returned.
And there it is, with that simple, quiet, but incredibly profound action. The miracle is complete. The boy who was dead is alive. A mother's absolute despair is turned into just unimaginable joy. What a powerful end to that journey.
Okay, so we've seen these miracles dealing with these really intense, personal family crises. Now the camera kind of pulls back, and we see problems that are affecting a whole community. We're going to look at 2 quick stories that tackled the communal fears of being poisoned and starving.
So, remember that death in the pot moment from the very beginning? This is it. There's a famine, and one of the prophets in training accidentally puts poisonous wild plants into the community stew. Just as everyone realizes the fatal mistake they've made, Elisha calmly throws in a handful of flour.
The basic stuff of life, of bread, and instantly the deadly stew is completely safe to eat. A threat to the whole group, just neutralized.
The second crisis is about extreme scarcity. A man brings Elisha a gift of food, just 20 small barley loaves. And Elisha's command sounds absolutely crazy. He says, "Give it to the people to eat." His servant is just stunned. He's looking at Elisha, looking at the tiny bit of food, and looking at 100 hungry men. How is this supposed to work?
And you can see the servant's dilemma right here. The gap between what they had and what they needed was just massive. 20 little loaves for 100 grown men. It wasn't just a stretch. By any normal logic, it was completely impossible.
But that was Elisha's promise, and it's exactly what happened. And get this, they didn't just have enough to get by. No, they all ate until they were totally full, and there were still leftovers. This was a miracle not just of having enough, but of having an overwhelming abundance. Okay, so we've just walked through 4 really different miracles: solving crippling debt, reversing death itself, neutralizing poison, and multiplying food. So what's the pattern here? What's the common thread that ties all of these incredible stories together?
Well, when you lay them all out together, a really clear picture starts to form. Every single story shows a powerful intervention right at the moment of extreme human need. They tackle the most basic fears of life, don't they? Economic ruin for the poorest people, the finality of death, the terror of starvation. And in every single case, scarcity is transformed into abundance, and total despair is turned into hope.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Beyond the wow factor of the events themselves, what is the purpose of telling a miracle story in the first place? Is it just to prove that a higher power exists? Is it meant to give hope to people who are in their own desperate situations? Or maybe, just maybe, it's to suggest that reality itself is a little more flexible than we think. It's a question that asks us to look past the what and really think about the why.